Stopping the violence. Good morning. We're live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead this hour, the faith leaders of the interfaith group known as iCare ramp up the pressure for criminal justice reform. Here in the 904, we'll have a preview of their meeting tonight. Join us, 549-2937. Then later, an in-depth conversation with voting rights activist Stacey Abrams as she appears at the Florida Theater this week. All of that and more just ahead. But first this hour, local faith leaders from the coalition known as iCare are getting together tonight to call for more criminal justice reforms here in this city. Here's what they'll be talking about. Every year, thousands of adults are arrested for things like driving with a suspended license or having expired tags. They often can't afford to pay fines, or maybe their paperwork is not in order, leading to jail stays, which could be avoided for these minor offenses. Now, back in April, in front of more than 1,000 iCare leaders, Jacksonville Sheriff Mike Williams committed to work with State Attorney Melissa Nelson to create an adult civil citation program for these kinds of offenses, as well as make improvements to mental health training for police and other changes. Tonight, iCare is meeting, and they'll be calling on the sheriff and other officials to follow through on those promises. We've got a preview as we welcome two of the local leaders, the Reverend Tan Moss, pastor of Greater Grant Memorial AME Church, co-president of iCare. Good morning, Reverend Moss.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. Good to have you. Also on the
Thank
line,
you.
Jesse Holzer of the Jacksonville Jewish Center. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And as we talk about iCare and criminal justice reform in Jacksonville, give us a call, 549-2937. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @Melissa Well, Reverend Moss, let's begin with you. You know, over the years, iCare has had some success in successfully lobbying police and prosecutors to make some changes to our criminal justice system. You're trying to build on that. Tell us what you'll be discussing tonight.
Well, one of the primary things is adult civil citation program. We have had tremendous success with civil citations for youth. More than 500 young people who commit minor offenses are no longer arrested in Jacksonville, but they go through a program in which they are held accountable, a neighborhood accountability program. They're held accountable, they're taught valuable lessons, and they're restored back to the community. And over 98% of those young people go on to have successful lives and go to college and military without ever committing another offense. And we want to see that happen with adults who commit minor nonviolent offenses, much like you said, driving with a suspended license or expired tag. It saves our county a tremendous amount of money, more than $4,500 per arrest, as well as it holds adults accountable, and it prevents them from having a criminal record going forward for these minor offenses. So these are the things that we want Sheriff Williams to follow through on a commitment that was made back in April, along with State Attorney Nelson, working to bring that adult civil citation program to fruition here in Jacksonville.
Jesse Holzer, you're arguing that giving these people a criminal record, putting them in jail, also people with mental illnesses who end up behind bars for various infractions, that they can lose their jobs, they can lose their homes, they can even sometimes get injured or killed. But the bigger argument that the entire community, I think, will tune into is that your argument at iCare is that focusing on these minor offenses takes police's eyes off the ball in terms of bringing down our murder rate, bringing down the high level of violence in this city. Can you talk about that?
Yes, of course. The mental health has always been an issue, and it's definitely been exacerbated by this pandemic. And we know that we need trained officers that are trained, that have the experience and maturity to deal with mental health issues, so that when they get a call, that people who have the training can make sure that those with a mental health issue can be given the proper resources. And that does happen at times, but we want to make sure that it's not a have or have-nots. And so if they have the training, right now they are receiving that in the academy, so they're not receiving it on the job, having to had experience on the streets. Imagine being able to focus energies elsewhere because you are able to identify a mental health issue and give resources right away, so we don't have those things happen over and over again. I think that's really our focus, is to make sure that what we're calling crisis intervention teams exist properly within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department.
Reverend Moss, the sheriff himself will say that the biggest mental health facility in town is the Duval County Jail. It's interesting to note that for every arrest police make in this community, only 1 in 4 adults are ever charged, but that arrest record does follow you for life. So you're arguing that minor nonviolent offenses shouldn't face charges. What about the argument against that, Reverend Moss? People who will say that opening the door to that could open the door to more criminality, more lawlessness. What's your response?
Well, I think we would just have to look at proven cases and programs that are already showing success. Leon County was the first county in the nation to successfully implement this adult civil citation program. And when we track the data from that program, we find out that it has been completely successful. 8 out of 10 people that go through the program successfully complete the program. 91% of them never reoffend, and we're talking about adults, because they're held accountable. They are sanctioned. They pay the fees and the fines that are implemented. And they go on to live their lives without having a criminal record. And without having the criminal record, they can go forth and continue in their employment. They can apply for other jobs. They're not shackled with that criminal record. Because once you have a criminal record, it closes the door on so many opportunities. And for people to be shackled with that, for driving without a license or an expired tag, when many times it's a paperwork issue or a technical issue why that has happened, or it may be a financial issue. And so what I would point to is the proof in programs which are showing tremendous success as a counter to that argument. The same type of effects can happen here in Duval County for our adults with an adult civil citation program.
Let us know what you think, folks. What do you think about a civil citation for adults rather than an arrest for minor offenses? 549-2937. Now, Jesse Holzer, in April, Sheriff Williams appeared before hundreds of members of iCare, and he committed to a number of changes. Where do things stand with that promise?
So we are playing a waiting game right now. We asked for information. We asked for accreditation. Sheriff Williams believed that what he was doing is a proper CIT program, but as I pointed out earlier, it's not up to par. And so we asked that the International Crisis Intervention Team organization take a look at the program. And that's, I think, we want for any of what's going on in the police department. We want accountability. We want transparency. And so we have not heard back from Sheriff Williams that he has actually applied to be a part of that certification program. So we're waiting to hear on that. We're also waiting to hear on information on their website for some of these issues. As you pointed out, 1 in 4 are arrested. Well, what's happening with those other situations? How are they de-escalated? Are there mental health issues that are being tagged so that when the same person is called for again, that there's an understanding. So that kind of information we want to make sure is given to the public. And so we're starting to see a little bit of that, but we hope that come this evening we have a lot more information from the sheriff so we can have some transparency from his department.
And will the sheriff be on hand tonight? Can people hear him speak? Will he be interacting with your group?
He has not been confirmed, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Reverend Moss, you
so
to the contrary?
So then, Reverend Moss, if the sheriff doesn't show, then iCare goes into the mode that, honestly, I think it's been in since the beginning, using the leverage of your interfaith coalition, which is quite diverse and large, to pressure the local criminal justice system. That's really why you formed, right?
Absolutely, and we will use media outlets just to continue to underscore the importance of these initiatives and how impactful that they are for Duval County and for everyone in all of the citizens of Duval County, as well as we'll continue through our coalition to press the sheriff to wage a campaign by way of letters and calls and other things that will get the sheriff's attention and to press him to fulfill the commitment that he's made. And so those are the things that we will do ongoing. But we believe that the sheriff will be in attendance. We are standing on that. He's made a commitment, and he fulfilled his commitment when we were working with Civil Citations for Youth. And we know how impactful that has been. We know how successful that has been. He sees the parallel between the youth and adults. And so we just want him to fulfill the commitment because we know it works.
5492937. We have a preview of tonight's virtual iCare assembly. You can join it tonight at 7 o'clock on Zoom. Details on that in a few minutes. Mark in St. Augustine. Hi, Mark. Go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call. Sitting here listening to this, it sounds like a really great idea, but sometimes these things have a way of expanding or doing things with unintended consequences. Is this going to morph into something where, well, now it's not just these little civil citations, but it's low-level violent crime, and, well, this guy hit somebody and they're not dead, so we're going to put him in this diversion plan, and or if they're shoplifting or I don't want to see that. If you're strictly dealing with people that are down and out, they forgot to pay a fine, or they did this, or this really low-level stuff, that's fine. But the minute it starts to go where you stole something or you hit me, I don't want it to be in some kind of diversion program. I want whoever to go to jail.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Jesse Holzer, Jacksonville Jewish Center, that's the argument I was getting at earlier. How do you prevent this from becoming a slippery slope? Because certainly you'll hear that argument made that you don't want to open the door to civil citations for more serious offenses.
Yes, well, as Reverend Moss said, we go by example. And so our example in this case is our proven youth civil citation model. And so knowing the parameters for that, I think we stick with what we know. And again, we're talking specifically about low-level offenses. And I think because of our model for youth, ironically, that leads us to how adults can behave because of how successful our youth civil citations program has been in the city. And I know we're knocking at Sheriff Williams this morning, but I know for this past year there was I think we were over 99% of possible civil citations for youth were given, which was the highest in the state. And so because of that model working locally for the youth level, I think that gives us the parameters for where we can begin and also when we might be able to stop in terms of the level of abuses.
Daryl, go ahead, Reverend Moss.
And if I could just add to what Jesse just said, one of the major steps that we took on in formulating civil citations for the youth was we gathered all the stakeholders together and came up with a memorandum of understanding as to how the process would work and what would be the offenses that would be considered for the civil citation. And so once that memorandum of understanding was signed between the chief judge, the sheriff, the state attorney, public defender, teen court at that particular time, we knew exactly what offenses would qualify. And so those would be the offenses. So that prevented it from going into a slippery slope and other things being considered. And so there were some definite parameters there that gave guidelines and to help to keep the whole program focused. And we want to do the very same thing with adult civil citations. So one of the major steps that we need to take in a concrete action is to bring all the stakeholders together to come up with a memorandum of understanding.
Okay. Daryl in St. Augustine. Yes, Daryl, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning. The civil citation makes complete sense. The only thing I would add to it is I would like to see the money that go for the fees that are collected be spent on, schools, teaching, education, things to help people get out of poverty, get out of debt, get out of all of the things. Right now, the incentive and the money appears to be going to JSA or the court system, and that's a built-in incentive to arrest you, put you in jail. It costs literally tens of thousands of dollars to get arrested. And that's, I think, why you see a lot of people who run from the police because of their taillight out, because they know that the amount of money that costs lawyer fees, court fees, everything else is just outrageous. And so take the financial incentive away from JSO and the court system and put it in the rehabilitation and assistance. So
yeah, the money piece is interesting, Daryl. Thank you. Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Jesse Holzer, let's talk about how the system is incentivized economically, and if you think your organization could speak to that too.
Yes, for civil citations, we're talking about almost a 10-to-1 difference. So that to process an arrest might be $4,000, whereas processing a civil citation is $400. So it saves the city, because again, the city is the one paying it. It saves the city thousands of dollars for every arrest that's turned into a civil citation. So it's financially important there. For the CIT training that we're talking about, we have a model that we've used in Miami-Dade County, in which they reduced the number of people in jail from 7,000 to 4,000, where they were able to close one of their jails, and they had a savings of $12 million. And that jail has been closed for 7+ years. So I think when you go to the city, because that's also our other partner in this, and we say that we're going to save millions of dollars by civil citations by enacting a proper CIT program, I think the city listens.
Susan, Carnell on the north side first. Carnell, go ahead.
Hello. One of the things I want to outline, dealing with the sheriff's office, he's going to be resistant because the simple fact, it's going to take food out of his mouth, because it's the marketing piece of the criminal justice system of what's the power of our institution that most people don't understand about the criminal justice system. I've had somebody call me and tell me that their child got arrested and they're sitting in the juvenile detention center because the officer didn't like what the boy said, and the boy was tricked into getting into handcuffs. Now, this is the argument when it comes down to law enforcement. They're supposed to protect and serve, but since they understand that the benefits and the incentives of incarceration will maintain their financial purposes. The number one key issue with our local sheriff, Mike Williams, is that it will take food out of his mouth. That means that he will have to reduce his staff, and that means that a certain level of crimes will be reduced, because if you put the proper policies in place, it will take away all of the argument about continuous crime. Because if we can reduce ignorance by putting crime prevention programs like civil citation as far as adults and children in place, we could create more equity and opportunities, because I've been affected by the criminal justice system.
Yeah. Thanks,
And
Carnell.
That's my word.
Thank you. Okay. So Carnell's making the argument someone else made, Reverend Moss, that there are financial incentives to keep the system in place, not just for JSO, but we have a huge carceral state in the United States of America. We have for-profit prisons. There are all kinds of motivations to keep the current system in play. And of course, recently on the Jacksonville City Council, a criminal justice reform committee fell apart because City Councilman Michael Boylan walked away. He quit the effort. Here's a tweet from Mike. Will iCare advocate for Safer Together? Reverend Moss, will you pressure the City Council as well to take up the effort at criminal justice police reform? which they have stopped doing?
Well, to the caller's statement, I would only suggest that from the perspective of our sheriff and the perspective of our state attorney, when we initially started this idea of civil citations for young people, they embraced the notion that these young people being arrested was not the problem. We could not arrest our way out of the problem, and we had to embrace this idea of smart justice. And smart justice equated to the development of a methodology that would allow young people not to be arrested, but to go through an accountability process that would hold them accountable, teach them valuable lessons that would help them to be responsible adults and to return to the community. And so the civil citation, it came into fruition. And what we've seen is that it has had a tremendous impact. And so 500 children a year are not arrested. And so the sheriff supported this idea, state attorney supported this idea. They saw how effective it's been. They've seen how young people are able to go on with their lives without being shackled with a criminal record. And so this idea of this financial incentive being the reason why things won't change, the idea that we have civil citation, it counters that argument. And so we believe that the same thing will happen with adult civil citations. We know that the sheriff understands that for these minor offenses, driving without a license or an expired tag, we've seen how effective it's been in Leon County, and the same thing can happen here. And so we believe that the sheriff is going to support and is going to work with all of the other stakeholders to bring into fruition this civil citation program that will impact the lives of adults as well as the budget of the Duval County.
Well, thank you both for this preview. The Reverend Tan Moss, co-president of iCare, pastor at Greater Grant Memorial AME Church. Also with us, Jesse Holzer, Jacksonville Jewish Center. The Zoom tonight, the iCare Community Problems Assembly takes place tonight, 7 p.m. on Zoom. You can go watch the Zoom at Christ the King Catholic Church on Arlington Road North, or you can Zoom in from home. Call iCare at 388-9181 or email them for details, icarejacks@gmail.com. Thanks so much to you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And much more still ahead. Later, the Jaguars win at home against the Bills Mafia. Our Josh Torres was in the press box. He'll recap all the action, but up next.
The reason it's so critical that every citizen be able to cast a ballot and have that vote counted is so that they can make choices about how we best live our lives and the work that government should do.
An in-depth conversation with voting rights activist Stacey Abrams as she visits the Florida Theater this week. That's next.
The Jacksonville Music Experience from WJCT Public Media is your ticket to the local scene. Music reviews, curated playlists, music history, concert recommendations, profiles of local artists, and more. Turn your ear on the beautiful noise emerging from Northeast Florida and learn more about the local artist whose music is reverberating across the country. Visit jacksmusic.org to play it local and play it loud.
WJCT Public Media is bringing you a new healthcare show, What's Health Got to Do with It? Our goal is to help you navigate all things health and healthcare and get you the answers you deserve. Join me, Dr. Joe Servin, Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 9 p.m. on WJCT News 89.9. Sponsored in part by American Brain Foundation, Epilepsy Foundation, and Norellis.
Teach returns on Saturday, November 13th at the Hyatt Regency Jacksonville. Visit wjct.org/teach for additional details and to get your tickets now.
Welcome back. Well, Indivisible Jax Riverside and the League of Women Voters, Jax First Coast, are both sponsoring a rally this Friday. It's happening at 4 p.m. outside the Downtown Supervisor of Elections office in support of the Freedom to Vote Act. This federal legislation is intended to protect elections from an array of assaults on voting rights, everything from voter suppression to partisan sabotage, gerrymandering, and dark money. Against this backdrop, voting rights activist Stacey Abrams is coming to town this week. Now, I'll be moderating an event tomorrow night with Abrams at the Florida Theater, and we'll be discussing her national campaign to ensure everyone has access to the ballot. Last week, I spoke with Stacey Abrams about voting rights and also her rise to national prominence after first losing a governor's race in Georgia and everything she did after that. Here's that conversation. Take a listen. Stacey Abrams, a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
And of course, there's lots to discuss when we talk about your national advocacy around voting rights. But before we get into that, something caught my eye the other day. Your political action committee, Fair Fight, recently branched out from its main purpose of expanding voter rights into healthcare advocacy. Now, through Fair Fight, you actually wiped out the medical debt of more than 100,000 people in the South, in Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and I believe Arizona, too. Tell us about that.
Well, we don't consider it going far afield from voting rights because the reason we vote, the reason it's so critical that every citizen be able to cast a ballot and have that vote counted is so that they can make choices about how we best live our lives and the work that government should do. Government can't solve every problem, but it has an obligation to help where it should. And healthcare is a fundamental right. And we believe that medical debt, especially in southern states that have refused to expand Medicaid, is a pox on what should be done by our leadership. It's callous, it's mean, and it's unnecessary. We know that in Florida, in Georgia, in Alabama, in Mississippi, in Arizona, well, Arizona's actually expanded, but in those southern states, we know that more and more people are falling behind because of the pandemic, but also simply because the tax dollars they have paid into the system are not being spent to expand Medicaid in their states. And that should be untenable to every American. And so for us, working on medical debt is a part of working for democracy, making sure it works.
A part of democracy. Now, you are on a national speaking tour, and when we meet on November 9th at the Florida Theater, we will be talking about voting rights at length. And the message you've been sending for a while is that you believe excluding voters, suppressing the vote, making it harder for some categories of people to vote, is what has spurred a series of voting restrictions across the country in the aftermath of the 2020 election. We have seen voter suppression measures passed in both Florida and Georgia and other states around the country. What's your response to supporters of these measures who say they're in the name of election integrity?
I would ask them to show me what they're trying to fix. What has been consistent in every single state that has passed these bills has been a failed attempt to show and demonstrate any degree of fraud, any degree of undermining democratic norms. It didn't happen. And there have been multiple lawsuits. There have been sham audits. It did not happen. And so why are you trying to fix something that is clearly not broken? Well, we know that what is broken, what has been broken, is access for certain communities, namely young people, people of color, newly naturalized citizens. They have each faced discernible, provable, and unfortunately continued impediments to their right to vote. And now we've added or layered on top of that further harms that will be done to the disabled community, further harms done to the elderly, and all in the name of fixing a problem that does not exist. Voter suppression is real, voter fraud is not.
Let's talk about access to the ballot here in Florida for a bit. Now, earlier this year, Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law a measure that made a number of changes to our elections. It's harder to register to vote. Rules for observers were changed. Restrictions on providing snacks or water to voters in line. But it really took aim at mail-in voting, making that more difficult, also making it harder for voters to access ballot drop boxes. And of course, a few years ago, even after voters approved a constitutional amendment allowing ex-felons to vote, they now have to pay fines and fees before they can cast a ballot. And even just this week, professors at the University of Florida who specialize in election law were told that they cannot testify in a lawsuit that's been filed over this new law in Florida. And so this is a very topical issue in Florida, particularly as UF tries to calm the firestorm over this recent announcement. So given all of these restrictions here and nationwide, where do you stand on the movement, or lack of it really, in the U.S. Senate around the For the People Act? That's the federal democracy reform bill that's being touted as a way to forestall further suppression of the vote in America.
We know that in Florida, for example, it's going to cost counties thousands of dollars more to simply meet the requirements of a law that does not fix a notable problem. What we do know it will do is undermine the access that thousands of Floridians were able to enjoy so they could participate in elections. Not people who were supposed to be removed from the process, but people who should expect by virtue of their citizenship to participate. It is similar to what is happening in Georgia and unfortunately in 17 other states now. And we know that there are pending bills in almost every state in the nation. And come January, they will likely ramp up this voter suppression wave. The only way to stop this wave from washing our country with voter suppression as a precursor to authoritarianism, and I'm not being hyperbolic, it is that we have to have a federal law that sets the standards, the minimum standards for how elections should happen in the US. We are not saying that if you live in Florida versus living in Missouri versus living in Oregon, that every single rule has to be the same. But we are saying that there are some foundational rules that shouldn't change based on your geography, that your ability to register shouldn't change, that your ability to cast a ballot via mail shouldn't change, that your ability to drop your ballot off in a drop box shouldn't change based on where you live. Because we know that we are in the 21st century, 20 years into it, and that what we used to do in the 1780s and 90s should not be the methodology for how we vote today. But more importantly, we know people live complicated lives. And if we have federal standards that set a baseline, we become a stronger country. Now, the US Senate has been slow to act, but I believe if you look at our Congress writ large, we've been slow to act on a number of issues. But what I am not doing is throwing in the towel. I'm proud of the fact that the US Senate Democrats, at the very least, have continued to push this forward. They remain in conversation, and more importantly, they remain engaged in trying to solve this problem. And what we also know is that the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is a corollary to the Freedom to Vote Act, and that together those two bills will do something that is critical. One is that the Freedom to Vote Act will negate several of the more egregious voter suppression laws that have passed already, and that the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will preclude new bad from happening to millions of voters. Together, this is not about partisanship. It's about patriotism. I don't care who you vote for when you go into the booth, but your right to join in this conversation, in this democracy, should not be impeded because of your zip code, because of your race, because of your age, and because of whom people presume you will vote for.
And certainly voting is fundamental to our democracy. And there is growing concern about creeping authoritarianism in America. Let me ask you, though, let's just say, for the sake of argument, these efforts to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act fail. Now, we know that in 2020, former President Trump tried to stop the election certification results. He incited the January 6th insurrection. He tried to get state lawmakers to refuse to certify, to in effect declare their own slates of electors, alternate electors. He tried to get Vice President Mike Pence to go along with this. The vice president wouldn't. But now states are changing laws so that if we do have a close election in 2024, a number of states may just refuse to certify. They may send a rogue slate of electors of their own to add their names to the Electoral College results. So this is something that I think goes outside increasing access to the ballot, because what if the vote is decisive, yet it doesn't matter because a number of states just refuse to accept it, and they use these procedural maneuvers so that the vote doesn't count.
And if your vote doesn't count, that's denying you access. And so I want to always bring it back to the voters, but you're absolutely right that this is an attack on the system itself. And we like to frame it in three ways. There's direct voter suppression, which impedes access to the ballot. There is election intimidation, which is the threats that we've seen increase against election workers, making it harder and harder for those noble women and men to do their jobs. And these are largely people who are who are older in age. And then the third is the subversion of democracy itself. It is the willingness to say that, yes, you cast your ballot. Yes, you made your voice clear, but we didn't like what you said, so we're going to throw it out. We're going to ignore it. The subversion of democracy should be chilling to every single person, because the reality is, even if you think you like what it will yield you in the instant where voter suppression and voter subversion works, imagine when it gets into the hands of someone who doesn't agree with you. The minute we break democracy in any way, we break it for everyone. There is no way to have this shattered matrix of democracy where some people benefit and others don't. If it is broken, we lose trust, we lose capacity, and we lose leadership. And so the subversion of democracy, especially in a state like Florida, that is so populated by people who moved to Florida because they were escaping those who did not value their voices, those who were willing to rewrite the results of elections because they did not agree with the outcome. Those are the very people who should be the loudest in opposition to this language and to this intent. Because the minute we tell any person in power, you have the right to change the results to fit your needs, then we are ceding our authority as voters, and we are creating authoritarians on our own land.
And I think people who are worried about this have become quite active in a number of states. And quite frankly, they're looking to you. You could argue that the only reason the Democrats have a majority in the Senate, with Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock both winning those elections in Georgia, is because of the way you organize the state of Georgia. You've become a national leader thanks to those efforts in the voting rights movement, but you spent a lot of years doing that. So what are your thoughts about the way people in other states are trying to emulate your efforts now?
Well, I want to separate out the two pieces. There is the part of me that is a Democrat, and proudly so, stood as the standard bearer for my party in 2018 and absolutely encouraged people to vote for President Joe Biden, for Senator Jon Ossoff, and for Senator Raphael Warnock. That's what I do as a private citizen with a partisan intent. But before I did that work, I am an American who believes in the right to vote, because my father was arrested when he was 14 registering voters. My mother was doing the same work, and they were teenagers in Mississippi who understood that the denial of the right to vote was a denial of their citizenship and an undermining of their humanity. I support anyone who wants to emulate the work that I've done, because if you're doing it right, you're expanding access to the right to vote for anyone who is eligible to participate. We need to do better work, as you saw in Florida. We need to do more work about who's eligible to participate. Desmond Meade and the coalition did extraordinary work that was undermined by the leadership. But one of the ways you change that is by getting more people's voices involved and holding our leaders accountable. That's why what's happening with redistricting right now across this country is so essential, and why the Freedom to Vote Act is a clear way to help ensure that voters' voices get heard. I want people to emulate my dedication, my passion for voting rights, because that's how we preserve our democracy. And to go back to the very beginning of this conversation, I understand how medical debt can impede your ability to take care of your family. And for me, that is a voting rights issue. Your ability to participate fully in our society comes down to whether or not we have the right rules in place. And if we can do the right thing and elect good people who care about us, who see us, and who value us, then we are a stronger democracy because of it. And so, yes, I want everyone to be involved and engaged. And I'm talking to folks across the country, not only about voting rights, but talking about leadership, talking about how do you develop your own set of issues that you're willing to fight for, and talk about how do you engage people in your communities, because we all have something that drives us. And I want every person who wants to be heard to have the skills and the tools to know how to engage their friends, their family, and their communities in those conversations. And so this national conversation, this conversation that's coming to Jacksonville, is really about how do we ensure that every one of us, regardless of our partisanship, remember our patriotism and do what we can to protect our nation.
It's going to be a great conversation on the 9th at the Florida Theater. But before I let you go, Stacey, I want to ask you about another very interesting sideline you have. People might not know this about you. You are a prolific author of several critically acclaimed novels, and your 2004 novel, Never Tell, it was just announced. It's being adapted into a new television series at CBS. That's pretty exciting.
I'm very excited. The writer for the project is Barbara Hall, most recently known for creating Madam Secretary, although I didn't know that I've loved her for years because she was one of the writers on Moonlighting.
Oh,
years
wow.
and years ago,
I loved that
with
show.
Bruce Willis and
Yeah.
Sybil Shepherd. And so
Yeah.
I've been a fan of her work for years.
That is so cool. Well, just one aspect of a very interesting individual. So, Stacey Abrams, it's a pleasure. And again, I look forward to having this conversation with you Tuesday, November 9th at the Florida Theater when we talk about voting and democracy. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Looking forward to it.
Again, it's an evening with Stacey Abrams. I'll be moderating. It's tomorrow night at the Florida Theater. Just a few tickets left. Go to floridatheater.com. See you there. And in a moment, the Jags beat the Bills right here in Duval yesterday. A recap of their win as the Bills Mafia leaves town in defeat. Josh Torres was in the press box. He'll have a look at sports right after this. You're listening to First Coast Connect on 89.9. Don't go away.
For the best music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, tune into 89.9 HD3, the WJCT app, or jacksmusic.org. We've got your music on Anthology on 89.9 HD3.
Congaree and Penn Landscape Trees, now specializing in landscape and architectural lighting. More info and appointments available at congareetrees.com or 527-1945. ServPro of Jacksonville South, Arlington, Jacksonville East, and Jacksonville West Side, Orange Park. Whether it's water, mold, or fire damage, will help you restore your home or business. ServPro of Jacksonville South, Arlington, Jacksonville East, and Jacksonville West Side, Orange Park. Available 24/7, 721-2230.
The names of hundreds of world leaders and celebrities are tied to secret financial transactions, offshore holdings linked to Russian President Vladimir Putin, the King of Jordan, or former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair.
The other day I found a new former Prime Minister from a country who none of us had discovered before, so it's a gift that keeps on giving in some ways.
An investigative reporter on what the Pandora Papers have revealed. It's on The World.
this afternoon at 3 here on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Fresh Air, Andie MacDowell talks about playing a woman with a mental health disorder in the new popular Netflix series Made. McDowell's daughter, Margaret Qualley, plays her adult daughter in the series. McDowell became known in the 90s for such films as Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Groundhog Day, and 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Stealthing is a form of sexual assault, but last month, California became the first state to actually make it illegal. A recent U.S. study found that at least 12% of women have had someone remove a condom during sex without their consent. We don't talk a lot about it, and some still think of it as a prank. What does it take to make stealthing a crime? Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the Jags beat the Bills at home Sunday. Our director, Josh Torres, is here now with the highlights and some other sports news and notes. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Melissa.
So it was exciting to see the team rack up their second win of the season.
Yes,
Finally.
It was. Yes, it was, Melissa. You know, it was, Saturday was a pretty dreary day. Yesterday turned out to be a really nice day to be outside to watch the Jags. The ice cream machine up in the press box was actually working for once, so we all got to enjoy a little ice cream.
It's a metaphor for the day.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. The Buffalo Bills came to town. Bills Mafia absolutely invaded Jacksonville.
Yeah, they really did.
People who don't even know really know sports knew they were here because everybody kept texting me, why are there so many Bills fans? Like, there's just so many. But anyway, they came in. They had the number one offense in the league. This was a game that nobody even imagined the Jags were going to stay close in. They came in as a 15-point underdog, and they absolutely stole the show. I should say the defense stole the show, especially Josh Allen, who, and this is going to get a little confusing, the Jags, Josh Allen, sacked the Bills' Josh Allen, intercepted the Bills' Josh Allen, and recovered a fumble by the Bills' Josh Allen. So it was a lot of Josh Allen on Josh Allen. But that, again, the defense absolutely stole the show yesterday. All season, they've only had 2 forced turnovers. Yesterday, they had 3. They kept this game going the whole way through. The offense was okay. I mean, they didn't do anything really spectacular. Trevor Lawrence had a respectable game. He finished, I think he only finished for about 118 yards, 15 for 26. Didn't throw a touchdown pass, but more importantly, he didn't turn the ball over at all yesterday. There was a scare in the second quarter when he went down with an ankle injury. And let me tell you, Melissa, the moment everybody realized he was down on the field, you could hear a pen drop in the bank. I mean, it was dead silent and he went back to the locker room. A lot of people thought he might not return to the game, but just before the half ended, he came back. He ended up playing the rest of the game. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, the defense again showed up to play, and they kept this, and the Jags won their second game, their first game at TIAA Bank Field. Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer's first game at TIAA Bank Field, coming out with a win, 9-6 against the Buffalo Bills. And now this week they go into Indianapolis to take on the Colts.
Let's hope they keep the momentum going. All right, let's talk college ball for just a minute. The Florida Gators continue their slide.
Oh, yes, Melissa. They have dropped their third game in a row, 40-17 against the South Carolina Gamecocks. Now they drop below 500. They're 4-5. And Dan Mullen, the last few weeks for Dan Mullen have not been good. His seat is getting hotter and hotter by the minute. But then we go up to their rivals, Georgia, who continued to be one of the, if not the most dominant team in college football right now. 43-6 win over Missouri. They have not allowed a single opponent this year to score more than 13 points on them. That is, in college football, that's insane to think that would happen. Then we go over to Tallahassee. FSU lost their 6th game of the year, 28-14. They Mackenzie Milton did get the start for the Noles this week, but unfortunately he couldn't get it done, and FSU now sits 3-6 on the year. And then we go to Miami, who took on Georgia Tech, got a much needed 33-30 win against the Yellow Jackets, and now actually this weekend they travel to Tallahassee to take on the rival Florida State Seminoles.
Okay, let's talk about NASCAR before we let you go. You are well known as a Formula One fan.
Yes, but I always say I do respect all forms of racing.
So tell us about the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs.
Yes, they finished up their playoffs last night in Phoenix, and Kyle Larson got his first Cup Series championship. He took the pole, and then just before the race ended, he grabbed a late lead after the last round of pit stops and held off a charge by Martin Truex Jr. Actually, on the last lap, I think Truex Jr. got somewhere between like 0.3 of a second, which is almost nothing in racing terms. And I really thought for a minute there that he was going to take it on the last lap, maybe a little bumping, beating to the line, and Truex really looked like he was going to charge through, but Larson held him off for the last lap, and he takes his first championship.
Congrats to him. And congrats to you, Josh. For people that follow you on Twitter at Josh is a Polar Bear, I don't know if you posted any pictures of this, but Josh made a big change in his appearance last week, which we are still getting used to. Josh had this long, glorious, flowing Samson-like hair, and now he's cut it all off.
Yes, I did. I'm glad this is newsworthy for everybody.
It's
everybody
newsworthy.
Here in the station still is getting used to it and still thinks I'm a different person.
Didn't you donate your hair to Locks of Love?
Yes, I did. The stylist who helped cut it was gracious enough to donate to Locks of Love. So I did donate all that hair that came off of my head.
That is a great donation because it's a great head of hair. And he's a great sports analyst in addition to being a great director of this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa.
Follow Josh on Twitter at Josh is a Polar Bear. And thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks also to senior producer Heather Schatz, associate producer Catherine Hobbs, editorial director Jessica Palumbo, and news editor Randy Roguski. I'm Melissa Ross. We'll be back at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Have a great Monday, everybody.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida